Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 11th Annual Chattahoochee Valley Sports Hall of Fame Induction Banquet. We appreciate all of you being with us this evening as we together honor the class of 2006. At this time, I'd like to ask that you please stand for the presentation of our nation's colors, the national anthem, and please remain standing for the retiring of the colors. Thank you. Please be seated. At this time, it's a great pleasure to introduce to you the class of 2006. Each inductee will be escorted by a cheerleader from one of the local high schools in the area. Let's begin with escorted by Glenwood School cheerleader Ashley Chambliss. We're pleased to introduce from Columbus High School and Georgia Tech, class of 2006 inductee Ed Adams. Have a seat. Escorted by Smith Station High School cheerleader and granddaughter, Hannah Britton, we're pleased to introduce from Milry High School and Livingston University, class of 2006 inductee, T.C. Britton. Escorted by Jordan High School cheerleader Kiara Rose, we're pleased to introduce from Jordan High School and Auburn University, class of 2006 inductee Chuck Hurston. Escorted by Central High School cheerleader Chastity Threadcraft, we're pleased to introduce from Central High School and the University of Alabama class of 2006 inductee Billy Jackson. Escorted by Glenwood School cheerleader Ashley Chambliss, we're pleased to introduce Randy Whitt, representing class of 2006 inductee, the late Sam Roberts. If you will kindly refer to the program on the table before you, you will note that we will begin shortly with the invocation, followed by the serving of dinner. Following dinner, we'll introduce various notables in the audience, past year inductees, and then the highlight of the evening, the induction of the class of 2006. At this time, it's my pleasure to introduce the pastor of First Baptist Church, Columbus, Georgia, Dr. Jimmy Elder, for our invocation. Dr. Elder, if you'll please come forward. Let's give Dr. Elder a round of applause.
Thank you, baby. I have no fight song and I have no cheerleader. And it was a little short notice to get an angel, but I worked on it. Would you join me in thanking Jim Whitt for all that he does to make possible a time of recognition? Anytime a community has the opportunity to celebrate excellence and accomplishment and affirm the lives of other people, we set further examples for young people and for people within our community. And I'm personally grateful for that. Will you join me as we offer a prayer for the meal? As we come before you, Lord, we thank you for each person who is recognized this evening, each one who has been recognized, and those that will be recognized in the future, some of whom will be inspired by the very ones whose names are called this evening. I thank you for people with the gentleness of heart and foresightedness to be able to celebrate the accomplishments of others, to wrap arms of affirmation around them, and for the impact that these lives make on our lives every day. Thank you for a community that is not too busy to pause and recognize individuals, and a community that is not too busy or too distracted to provide opportunities to create others, the environment for others where accomplishment can be in place and where their lives will be celebrated in the future. We thank you for the food, always acknowledging you as the provider of all things. For it is in your holy name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Elder. We will pause for approximately 30 minutes for dinner, and we ask you to please maintain your seat shortly after the completion of dinner in that 30-minute period as we'll reconvene and begin the evening's program. So enjoy the meal, everyone, and thank you for being with us. Good evening once again, everyone. May I welcome you again to the Chattahoochee Valley Sports Hall of Fame Induction Banquet. If you haven't completed your meal, please continue to enjoy it. However, before we honor the class of 2006, there are various people in the audience that I'd like to introduce to you, and we also need to express our appreciation to a number of people. Let me recognize first the presence of LaFay Dellinger, Mayor of Smith Station, Councilman Richard Cooley of Smith Station, and Napoleon Stringer and Larry Boswell of the Lee County School Board, and Mr. Jimmy Rollo, I understand, is the captain of the 1958 T.C. Britton coached state championship team. Welcome to all of you. Let's give them a round of applause. I also like to recognize the 29th Infantry Color Guard from Fort Benning. I believe most of the color guard just returned from duty in Iraq. So it's my opinion, and I know you share this with me, ladies and gentlemen, that these gentlemen are the defenders of our nation, the defenders of our liberties, and our way of life. So I think they are very, very much entitled to a tremendous round of applause. And I have recognized a Pittsburgh Steelers Super Bowl player in our midst from just a few weeks ago, Mr. Kendall Simmons. Kendall, I've lost track of where you are. How about, there's Kendall over there. We want to express our appreciation, of course, to the media. I hope you enjoyed the profiles of all of our inductees as presented this week. The Ledger-Enquirer sports editor Kevin Price, along with staff writers Krista Turner, David Ching, Robert Spruck, Damon Lawrence, and Troy Johnson. They did a wonderful job, in my opinion, in presenting the profiles of the inductees. Also like to thank WRBL TV3's Dan Edward. If you happen to be watching the nightly sports segment of the 6 o'clock and 11 o'clock news, you saw each of the inductee profiles there, and along with the support of Dave Platter at WTVM Channel 9. Let's give the media a round of applause, too. I'd like to express my personal thanks to a couple of people. First to Phil Scoggins, who is responsible for the production and the editing of the profiles that you're going to see very shortly on all the inductees. And I'd also like to thank Martha Paul for completing the table arrangements, including the inductee stands that have the pictures and the accomplishments on them. I would just simply ask that when you leave, please don't take those stands with you. We'd like to use them again, but to Phil and Martha, I express my appreciation to you, and let's give them a round of applause. Some 12 years ago, a group of local sports enthusiasts got together and said, how can we recognize those who had contributed to sports and who would contribute to sports? After a series of meetings, this organization, the Chattahoochee Valley Sports Hall of Fame, came into existence. The organization consists of 22 members today. The organization meets some 8 months out of the year. The months of July, August, and September are given to the election of the inductees for the subsequent year. The months of October and November are used for the preparation and execution of the annual Charlie Morrow Memorial Golf Tournament. And the months of December and January and into February, the preparation of this banquet that we've enjoyed tonight. If you're a committee member, board member of the Chattahoochee Valley Sports Hall of Fame, would you please stand and be recognized by the audience? And to you, ladies and gentlemen, I express my deepest appreciation for all that you do to make the Hall of Fame a successful entity. Would you please stand? We're always pleased to have past year inductees with us, and there's no exception this year. We have maybe 10 or 12 inductees, and I'd like to introduce each of them, asking them to please stand and remain standing until all have been introduced, and then we'll give them a round of applause. Let me begin with the class of 1997. From the class of 1997, Hall of Famer Cecil Darby. From the class of 1997, representing his father, Hall of Famer B.F. Register, his son, Lieutenant General retired Ben Register. From the class of 1998, Hall of Famer James Bubba Ball. From the class of 1998, Hall of Famer Woodrow Lowe. From the class of 1998, Hall of Famer Speck Richardson. From the class of 1999, Billy Key. From the class of 2000, Hall of Famer Frank Sonny Clements. From the class of 2000, Hall of Famer Jack Key Jr. From the class of 2001, representing Hall of Famer Chuck Everett, Ruth Everett. From the class of 2002, Hall of Famer George McCluskey Jr. From the class of 2002, Hall of Famer Hugh Royer Jr. From the class of 2003, Hall of Famer Marilyn Comiskey. From the class of 2003, Hall of Famer Bill Plager. From the class of 2003, Hall of Famer Wayne Trawick. From the class of 2004, Hall of Famer Wallace Davis. From the class of 2004, Hall of Famer Darrell D.J. Jones. From the class of 2005, Hall of Famer Debbie Ball. I hope I have not missed anyone. If I have, would you kindly speak? I think I have identified everybody that I knew was going to be in attendance. Ladies and gentlemen, these are our past year inductees, or representative of past year inductees. Let's give them a round of applause. And now it's time for the highlight of the evening, the honor and recognition of the class of 2006. Our first inductee captured numerous boys' tennis titles in singles and doubles, including the Georgia High School State Singles Championship in 1945, was a four-year letterman and varsity player at Georgia Tech from 1946 to 49, was number one player and SEC finalist in 1949, won the European Command doubles and was finalist in singles 1951 and 52, won numerous senior titles in doubles and singles from 1999 to 2005, resulting in being ranked number 2 in the 75 age bracket in singles and number 2 individually in doubles, was Corda Adult Male Player of the Year for 2003 and 2004. Would you please direct your attention to the screen?
Ed Adams is synonymous with the sport of tennis in Columbus. The Fountain City native broke into the spotlight at the age of 13 when he won the city championship in singles and doubles in 1941. The next year, he teamed up with Bo Calloway to advance to the finals of the Western Boys Tournament in Kalamazoo, Michigan. In 1943, he netted the Georgia State Junior Singles Championship, then teamed up with his brother George to take the doubles crown. Ed played 4 years of tennis at his alma mater, Columbus High School. His junior year, he traveled to North Carolina to claim the state's junior singles title. Then in 1945, the Blue Devils senior captured the Georgia State Singles Championship. That only set the stage for a remarkable career on the courts at the college of his choice, Georgia Tech. In 1946, his freshman year with the Yellow Jackets, they won the SEC Championship. Ed reached the singles finals of the SEC tournament as both a junior and a senior at Tech. Ed's prowess on the tennis courts continued during his stint in the Army. He won the European Command doubles title in Germany in 1951 and 52. Time has not taken its toll on Ed's tennis game. He has enjoyed tremendous success on the senior circuit. He won the consolation doubles in the National 70s tournament in 1998. The following year, he was runner-up in the 70s singles at the Southern Senior Open in Jackson, Mississippi. In 2003, Ed was ranked in the top 10 in the U.S. in the 75 singles and doubles. Then in 2004, he climbed to the number 2 ranking in the country in 75 singles and individually in doubles. Ed was singled out as the Adult Male Player of the Year in 2003-2004 by the Columbus Regional Tennis Association. Ladies and gentlemen, the Chattahoochee Valley Sports Hall of Fame is proud to induct Ed Adams.
Class of 2006 Hall of Famer, Ed Adams. I need to pose for the camera. You want to look down there at the camera?
Thanks. I worked hard on this speech with my critiquing from my wife and my children. I finally whittled it down to 30 minutes. Thought y'all liked that. But honestly, first of all, I want to thank the Chattahoochee Valley Hall of Fame Committee for picking me to be inducted into this organization. I'm very flattered because I'm in here with others who I realize have been better athletes in their sport and have certainly done more for Columbus, Georgia than I have. But I'm still going to accept this. I'm not going to turn it down. When Jim Whitt called this fall, well, last September, to tell me I was to be inducted, I was playing in Arlington, Virginia in the National 75 clay court. And he said, with this honor coming up, you ought to play really good, be inspired. Now, well, the next day, in the third set of a doubles match, I tore a hamstring. I had to default that match, then I had to default the singles match. The next day, came home on crutches and didn't play for 3 months, really. So I don't know, I'm just glad they selected me before that tournament. Might not have been too good. I've been blessed throughout my life. God gave me a healthy body and some talent to develop. I have tried to develop it anyway. I'm not sure he's totally happy with what I've done with it, but I have tried. I was born in a community called Naikipoo. Some of you older folks may remember that name. It was a community in north part of Columbus, well, actually north of Columbus. And it was a farming community. And right now, of course, it's in the Naikipoo is in the middle of the North Columbus, the way it's grown. My parents, my brothers, George, Philip, and Buster, my sister Charlotte, and I lived on a working farm. We were fortunate to have a tennis court in the backyard. And I mean, it was a clay court, and I mean Georgia red clay. And we didn't have to go anywhere to play. We could play right there at home. Our father played, as did my siblings. After we had finished our farm chores, like I say, it was a working farm, we did have to do farm chores. We'd get to play if we rolled, dragged, and lined off the court. We'd get to play. In those days, we had a community team. It played teams like Hamilton, Chipley, which is now Pine Mountain, and a team from Phoenix City, but Hugh Bentley got up. And then I got to play along that time also, excuse me, got to play with some of the older players, older than me. But some of you may remember Hugh Bentley's sports shop. And Mr. Bentley gave the trophy for the winning team. And if his team didn't win, it was awfully hard to get that trophy out of his display case. When we got old enough, my brother George and I used to pack up a small bag, get a tennis racket, get out on the two-lane concrete road out in front of the house and hitchhike to tournaments. We'd go to Atlanta, Mobile, Alabama, different places to play. When we ran out of money, we hitchhiked back home. Once I graduated from Columbus High, I went to Georgia Tech, where, as it said earlier, I played on the team for 4 years. And my brother George and Philip, they played at Georgia and at Auburn also. In the, let's see, I'm going to skip some of this because they said that earlier. After graduating from Tech, I worked in Columbus for a year, was drafted in the Army, sent to Germany, where I wrote in here I was fortunate enough to be able to continue playing. Not exactly what happened. a major said he wanted me to play, and I said, no, I'm not going to play. And so I got orders when we were out on maneuvers to come back in and play. I guess that's the Army, the way they work the Army. And when I got back to Columbus, I worked on a family farm and married my wife, Catherine, and we moved to Cottonton, Alabama to help run the farm. For the 11 years on the farm, working from daybreak to dark, obviously I didn't have very much time to play tennis. And I moved to Columbus in '65, and for the next 15 to 20 years, I focused on building a real estate business and watching our 3 children, Tommy, Julie, and John, play tennis on the Hardaway tennis team. So I was not playing very much tennis, but finally in the middle 80s, when I was in my 60s, I decided I really wanted to play again and play seriously. So it took several years to get where I was even competitive at all. Since that time, I played in a lot of tournaments around the country in the 60, 65, 70, and 75 age groups, and have been lucky to have some success in some of them. Over the past 20 years, it was fun to get back involved in a hobby that really I had loved so much when I was younger. Tennis has been good to me. Catherine and I have traveled around the country making friends, a lot of new friends, a lot of good friendships. And it's been, like I say, a great hobby for me. Tennis on the senior circuit can be more interesting than you might think. I'm going to relate one story, and then I'm not going to be much longer. One night, we had a phone call from someone who said, I'm from the New York Times. I'm a reporter, and I want to talk to Ed Adams about his tennis. That was a year that I got ranked pretty high up in the singles, fortunately. And he said, Catherine didn't recognize his voice, put him on the phone. He says, I want to get a few comments from you, if you would. And I said, well, the ranking system doesn't always tell the story. Quite often you're not as good as a lot of players ranked below you. Well, that's probably true in most things. And he said, and I said, you know, really, I just don't play that good. And he says, I know, I've seen you play. And this turned out to be a friend that we'd gotten real close with from California, and he's still a friend in spite of that. But and this is getting toward the end, but I want to relate one more story. Whether it's true or not, I don't know. I heard a story about a tournament in the 85s, and they do have 85s, and they have 90s. And 2 players were playing, and one of them walked up to the net in the middle of the match and said, I'm embarrassed. I can't remember your name. And the other party stood there and he says, how soon do you need to know? And so, you know, of course, I'm getting in the 80s next year, so I'm getting close. In closing, I'd like to say I'm thankful for the friends, good friends I get to play with here in Columbus. One of the friends is Walker Harris, who was my doubles partner for over 50 years. He was at Tulane when I was at Tech, and we got to be good friends and played a lot of tournaments together. And most of all, I'm very lucky to have a wife of 52 years who is the only coach I've ever had. She's my chief critic, and I get some tough critiquing after matches. Sometimes I don't exactly like to hear it, but usually she's right, so I can't complain. I hope I haven't rambled too much, but I do want again to thank the committee that gave me an award I don't deserve, and which I'm not going to give back, and thanks to all of you who came tonight.
Ed Adams, congratulations, and congratulations to the family as well. Our next inductee began the football program at Smith Station, coaching the program for its first 13 seasons. Had a 99 wins, 25 losses, and 1 tie football record, a 148 win, 31 loss baseball record, and a 177 win, 58 loss basketball record while at Smith Station. Won 2A state championships in football and was 1A Coach of the Year in 1958. Following his coaching career, he was elected Lee County School Superintendent, where he served for 24 years, retiring from a school system with no debt, completely air-conditioned classrooms, and a surplus in the general fund. Jim, you'd appreciate that, wouldn't you? He was inducted into the Alabama Sports Hall of Fame in 2001, and the Smith Station High School Stadium was named in his honor in 2003. You'll please direct your attention to the screen.
T.C. Britton grew up in Milry, Alabama. He graduated from Milry High School and continued his education at Livingston State College, where he earned his bachelor's degree in education in 1956. 2 years later, he received his master's from Auburn University. Britton is a veteran of the U.S. Army paratroopers, serving his country from 1952 to 54. In 1956, he started the football program at Smith Station High School and wasted no time building the Panthers' reputation into a force to be reckoned with. After just 2 years at the helm, Britton's team went undefeated and claimed the 1958 state championship. That year, he was also named Class A Coach of the Year. Britton coached the Panthers in football for 13 seasons, posting a record of 99 wins, 25 losses, and 1 tie. He finished his football coaching career just like he started it. In his last 5 seasons, his teams lost only 3 games. 2 of those years, the Panthers went undefeated. Britton left such an indelible mark on the Smith Station football program, the Panthers Stadium was named after him in 2003. But Britton's coaching skills weren't just relegated to the football field. His basketball teams won 177 games over 13 seasons while losing just 58. His baseball teams were equally successful, posting a 148-31 mark over 10 seasons. In 1968, Coach Britton was elected superintendent of the Lee County Board of Education, a position he held for 24 years. Upon his retirement, he left the school system in an enviable position. All construction projects were paid off, all classrooms were air-conditioned, and there was a surplus in the general fund. In 2001, Coach Britton was inducted into the Alabama High School Sports Hall of Fame. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight, the Chattahoochee Valley Sports Hall of Fame is proud to induct T.C. Britton.
Let's give T.C. Britton, class of 2006 Hall of Famer, a warm round of applause. We need to get our picture made. Can you turn it? Is that lady? Okay.
Mr. Whitt, members of the platform committee, and all my former coaches and friends and players, former assistant coaches, and my family, and members of the audience. Thank you for coming. I really don't know where to begin, but I guess we have to begin somewhere. I see assistant coach out there, Sam Stringer, who worked with me several years, and if he wants to, he can come up here and make this speech for me and assist me a little more. First of all, I'm very humbled to be honored for this award. I really don't feel like I deserve it. There's too many people up here, all these pro players and played in Super Bowls and won them, and everybody else. I'm just a little small-time coach, and that's about all I've done. I'm certainly not up here for my playing career. I'm like Mr. Adam. I don't think I deserve it, but if this selection committee selected me, I'm going to take it. And I'm not going to give it back. When I get it, it'll be at the house. I want to say a special thanks to several people here, Dick Key, Johnny Sachs, and Yogi Rumsey in particular. If it wasn't for them spearheading this effort and doing the legwork, I wouldn't be here. Dick Key is former county commissioner in Lee County. Johnny Sachs, one of my former football players. And Yogi Rumsey, a football player from Russell County High School. And Yogi scored the first football touchdown against Smith Station High School. First game we played Chevala. They beat us 7-0, and I'll never forget him. He was just like a jitterbug. You couldn't hem him up, and we didn't hem him up. So, Yogi, I still think a lot of you, even though you beat me. You just made me want to go win the next one, and I did my best to do it. I want to thank the selection committee. I know it's time consuming. It takes a lot of work to be involved in something of this nature, but I appreciate it, and I know your family appreciates you being home with them a little more, because something like this takes time away from family. I didn't know who the members were, but later on somebody told me that two of the members were Cecil Darby and Max Wilkes. And I tell you what, if they think as much of me as I think of them, I know why they voted for me. Cecil Darby is one of the best sports writers I have ever known, sports editor, just a really fine fella. We got Cecil to come out and speak at our football banquet after we won the state championship. To Smith Station, getting Cecil Darby to come out and talk was about like a lot of people getting Bear Bryant to come out and talk. We thought the world of him. And Max Wilkes was an official from Phoenix City. And Max, the person, you'd like to see him coming when he came on the field. He was an honest official, he was a fair official, and he was a qualified official. I've never known Max Wilkes to even indicate in any way that he would call a play against somebody if it wasn't the right call. So Max, if you're out there, I appreciate knowing you and all you've done for sports. I want to especially thank my family. They're sitting around this round table here. My wife, 2 sons, 2 daughter-in-laws, and 3 grandchildren. I have a sister out there somewhere, and I don't see her, but she drove all the way from Waynesboro, Mississippi, a little town right close to where we grew up, her and her husband, and who was an outstanding coach at Cottonwood High School for about 22 years there. And he has some state championships in baseball, football, and everything else there. I'm glad that they could come. And certainly, you want to thank your players as many times as you can, even the cheerleader or 2 out there, and especially all the supporters. I want to thank Mr. Gregory Camp, who was my sponsor, and Mr. Jim Whitt, who was president of this organization, for them staying right in touch with me, keeping me up to date on everything that was going on, telling me when I needed to do something, and it was wonderful. First time I've ever met them tonight, but I've read a lot of letters from them. I always wanted to be a coach. I started wanting to be a coach when I was a young age. My uncle was a coach. I had some more uncles that we played summer ball, and they was always the coach. And I kind of wanted to be the coach in some of those Sunday evening teams. But I never did get to tell who got to play. It was always my uncles. But I look forward to being a coach. And I thought tonight I'd just talk with you a minute or 2 about what it took for a person like me to become a coach. I'm in the area of the farming area, like I'm a tennis player over here. I grew up on a farm. My daddy never done anything all his life but farm. We grew up as my daddy was a tenant farmer for 3 or 4 years when I was really young. Then he started renting some land to farm, and later on he began buying some land to farm. But about the time he got to be buying land for the farm, I was ready to leave there. Now, my life of being a coach is a reason that no educator should ever give up on a student who's willing to try. Too many times, we as educators, all we want to do is see who we can kick out of school, who we can keep from graduating. But really, you ought to be seeing about how many you can keep and how many you can graduate and what you can do for the students. I started off in a one-room school, 6 grades in one room. My uncle was the teacher, and he had been to school exactly 1 quarter. He was still going to summer school, getting his degree when I graduated from high school. That's the life of education back in those days. A lot of them started teaching right out of high school without the summer of education. I stayed there 4 years, moved over 1 row every year. We did nothing but play. My daddy, who went to the 3rd grade in school and went farming, so he told them that he wanted to close that little school down and that he was going to put his children on the bus going to the consolidated school down at Mary because he didn't think we was learning there. So anyway, they got mad with him, some of them, because they wanted to keep the little school. But when we got on the bus to go, then everybody else got on the bus and they closed the school down and transferred my uncle to Mary, where he started to coaching. And he was a good coach. In fact, he was considered a great high school coach. At that time, I was in the 5th grade, and they put me in a room with a teacher that was 70 years old, and 71 and 72. She was senile. We done nothing but play. We'd come in for dinner and get ready to go home. And I finished the 7th grade, and I couldn't read a lick. Nobody hadn't taught me. So the next year, they put me on a lady named Ms. Warren. I think about her every day. I love her and I hate her. But she stood right over my desk, I bet you half the time she was teaching, with one of those rulers, not just that little small one, a little long one. And naturally, when you can't read, your attention span not too much when you look at those books. So she'd pop me on the hand, and she'd say, "You got to do it." Well, in other words, if you want to know how much a dozen eggs costs, if you got 48 eggs, you can't work it if you can't read the problem. Well, I couldn't read the problem. But along about the end of the year, she had me where I could read just a little bit. But I got my report card at the end of the year. I had 32 F's. 32 F's. And it said that he will repeat 8th grade. Well, my daddy was just an old farmer, but the superintendent was elected. He wasn't appointed. And I had about 50 first cousins out in that neighborhood. And they had a big vote. And you didn't get to be the superintendent unless you got the vote of the people. So we went down to the courthouse about 2 weeks after school was out. Daddy called all principals and superintendents, everybody, Fessor. He walked in there and he said, Fessor, I just come down here to tell you that they say they want my son to repeat the 8th grade. He said, I just send my children 1 year to the grade. And he said, next year, I want him in the 9th grade. So they put me in the 9th grade. That summer, Daddy subscribed to the Mobile Register, and I love sports. So I got to learn to read. And when I started in 9th grade, I could read pretty good. They wouldn't let me play ball because I'd failed, but I passed everything. And all those other kids in 9th grade got to go out for ball, and I knew I was as good or better than most of them, but I couldn't play. And I didn't like that. So anyway, I worked hard on my books. And I got to playing. And after the 2nd game in the 10th grade, my uncle was the coach. He put me in 3 or 4 plays. But then when that Friday came, we were going to play Excel. He told me, he said, I was a substitute bus driver. I just turned 16. He said, he said, I want you to drive the bus home for me this evening. And said, I need your suit. I don't want you to go with us tonight. So he got my suit. Next morning, I read the Mobile paper. It said T.C. Britton scored 3 touchdowns and beat Excel. A couple of his former players had a furlough from the Army, and they used my name. Now, that was just everyday doing back then. It wasn't no exception. All right, in the 11th grade, I passed everything, and we were chopping cotton at the end of the 11th grade year, and I got to play all sports and was first string and done pretty good. So anyway, we was out there, and it was hot, about 100 degrees. My dad and my brother and about 15 others, and we were chopping. We looked up there, and there come the principal. He had stopped upside the road and was walking down the path. And when we got to the end of the row, he told Daddy, you know, they greeted one another. And he said, what I come to see you about, he said, T.C. is doing pretty good in school, and said he's a pretty good ball player. Said, I believe if you let me hold him back a year, he can get him a scholarship. Daddy said, Fessor, I told you one time, I'm going to tell you again. I send my children to school 1 year to the grade. And next year, he'll be coming out whether y'all pass him or not. And so anyway, that was the beginning. I passed everything, made A's and B's, and it was time to go to college. Now, I'd never been further from home except Mobile, which was 70 miles, Britton, Mississippi, 50 miles. So I got in the car with my uncle that summer because he was going back to get his quarter's worth. And anyway, I put my 2 pair of blue jeans, a pair of khakis, and 3 shirts in a pasteboard box. I had never seen a suitcase. I put it in the pasteboard box. I went up there and went in the dormitory room. Never rested to talk to anybody about going anything. I walked down the hall, found me a room, it wasn't nobody in it. I lay down on that mattress and went to sleep. The next day, my uncle told me I need to take English and math, science. I took English, I went in there, I found out where freshman English was. It was 6 weeks course in the summer. I went in there and it was a beautiful lady teaching it from New York City. And you got to remember, we had a brogue from that area I grew up in. For instance, it was about like this. In other words, we went down there hunting one day. Next morning, we come up to meet again. The old farmer come up. He said, "Y'all go hunting yesterday?" "Yes, sir." "I thought y'all was over there summers because I heard them dogs barking." That's the only way we knew to talk, everybody in that community. So me talking like that, and this lady from New York talking like she talks, we hit it off pretty good. The end of that 6 weeks, she called me up and told me. She said, "How about you stay in a minute after class and need to talk with you?" I stayed. She said, "I got something to tell you, and I really don't know how to tell you." I said, "Well, what is it?" She said, "You don't know enough to fail." So anyway, she said, "If you'll come back in here next quarter, next 6 weeks, I think I'll just give you an incomplete. I won't fail you. If you'll come back, I believe you can pass." So I did. I went back, and she passed me. And that's the last of they ever failed, last course. I think my minute's about up. But anyway, I got my job coaching. Coach Jim Homer from Columbus High School. I know that Cecil Darby probably remember. He was an outstanding basketball player many years ago. Went on to play at the University of Alabama and was their leading scorer for years, and a great coach at Livingston, a great coach in basketball. Mr. Page knew him, and he called him and asked him, did he have anybody coach football, basketball, and baseball? So he said, yeah, he had a man. So he told him my name. They got in touch with me. I came over, and they offered me the job that afternoon. And we began trying to put a team together. I started off 16 players. And Yogi, if you hadn't have won that first game, you could have won it if you'd have just protested to the Alabama High School Athletic Association, because I played about 6 NLs before. I didn't know it. Two of them hadn't even been in school the year before. Now, I taught 5 classes, coached all 3 sports, and if you don't believe that'll keep you busy, try it sometime. My wife was also a teacher, but we had 3 little boys about 2 years apart, and she had to lay out a whole year because they wouldn't let you teach if they ain't thought you was pregnant. So she had to stay out. But she was a wonderful supporter, went to all of our games, football games, home and away, all basketball home games, all baseball home games. And you need a wife like that to support you. And she did a great job of it. Now, 2 or 3 little things, and I'll sit down, that I want to mention that I remember very vividly. In 1958, where we won the state championship, went undefeated, Jimmy Rollo, and I saw him sitting back there, one of the better players I ever coached. I paired him and Clayton Taylor, who was another tough hombre. Alabama wanted both of them to sign with him, Bear Bryant. I paired him up to tackle, and we backed up about 5 yards to hit, and I thought it was an explosion. I'm telling you the truth, I like to lost my whole season right there. Anytime they tackled, from then on, they couldn't get but 2 steps back. You couldn't get a running start. That year we won five games by 7 points. We was playing Tuskegee, and we were undefeated. It was about the 8th and 9th game. We had them 7-0. They were running from the single wing. They drove that ball down, and it was on the 7-yard line. We couldn't stop them. They drove it all the way. And I was a person that wanted every player to be right where he's supposed to be. But for some reason, Jimmy Rollo left his linebacker position, jumped right down over that center, and he knocked that center all the way back into the fullback into the tailback, and recovered the ball. And that saved that season. I remember a comic we had, Robert Taylor. He's no longer with us. But we was playing a team, South Alabama, and we ought to have whipped them about 35 points, I figured. But anyway, I was making them a good speech about how tough these people were. And one particular boy played guard in front of him was real tough. And Robert stood up and said, "Hold, coach." He said, "Wait, and let me hit him one time. I call time out and come out here and tell you how tough he is." So he came out, and I said, "Robert, how tough was it?" He said, "Coach, I just told him we're going to run right here, and if he'd move over, I wouldn't have to block him." And said he moved up. We played Manchester when they had won about 44 straight ball games and I believe 4 state championships in Georgia. They couldn't get games and we couldn't get games. We had both been undefeated going on the 2nd year. They came down to Smith Station. We handed the ball off to their tackle the first play. Rather than our halfback, we handed their tackle, he scored. We did something else and he scored. We did something else and he scored. They had us 20-0. But Sidney Cooper woke up and he scored 3 touchdowns. We had them tied at the half. The second half, Bobby Bass ran a kickoff back 96 yards for a touchdown. Then we scored another touchdown, and we beat them. And 2 days later, a fellow at work in Manchester brought me a newspaper from Manchester Herald or whatever it was. And it said Sidney Cooper was 22 years old, and it had about 10 folks that ought to be granddaddies. But we whipped them. And the last thing is Kenneth Newberry. I saw him out there. When you saw Protho break his ankle up at Alabama that kept showing on TV, Kenneth broke his that bad or worse. We didn't have a lot of doctors around. We went out there and picked him up, picked his leg up, and his foot went straight down. They put him in a car and rushed him to Cobb Hospital, Dr. Elkins. Old Dr. Elkins, the fellow that fixed the cast on people. Well, Dr. Elkins came into the room about the time I got there. He didn't like football. And he looked, he said, "Son, how'd you do that, playing football?" Kenneth said, "Yes, I ought to cut the damn thing off." I don't know who it scared more, me or him. But it did get well, and he played another season. The last game that I ever coached in the regular season was against Abbeville. Again, we were both undefeated the last game of the season. They had 5 boys signed Division I school. Leroy Kelly, All-American from Alabama, played end and safety. Big Barnes boy played fullback and linebacker, played at Mississippi State. and some others. We battled that 7-7 till the last play of the game. We had the ball. It was 4th and 30. We had been on the 10. We ran a play, and they set us back 10. They set us back more. And on 4th and 30, we ran that old double reverse that you saw in the Super Bowl, just exactly like that. And Sidney was the halfback that threw it. He come around, and I saw Leroy Cook playing safety. He broke for him because we had run that reverse 2 times before that. He broke. And about that time, he saw that ball go over his head, and my boy caught it in the end zone, falling down, and we won the ball game. It was a great ride being coach. I enjoyed every minute of it, and I've never done anything in my life that I enjoyed more than coaching. I'm sorry for taking too much time, but appreciate it. Thank you.
Congratulations, Mr. T.C. Britton and family. Our next inductee was All-By-City in football from Jordan High School in 1959. Played and lettered 3 years at Auburn from 1962 through 1964, and was later voted on the All-Decade team for the 1960s as a tackle by Auburn fans. Played in the North-South Shrine Bowl game on Christmas Day, 1964. Was drafted by both the Green Bay Packers and Buffalo Bills, eventually becoming a starter with the Kansas City Chiefs as a defensive end, and was a starter for the Kansas City Chiefs in Super Bowl #1, and played with the victorious Chiefs in Super Bowl #4. Please direct your attention to the screen.
The road to the first Super Bowl started at Jordan High School for Chuck Hurston. Hurston starred for the Red Jackets in the late 50s, becoming a unanimous All-By-City selection as an end. Next stop, Auburn University. Chuck was a 3-year letterman for Coach Shug Jordan's Tigers from 1962 to 64. He played on the 1963 squad that finished 9-2, good enough for a 5th place national ranking in the final Associated Press poll. Auburn fans selected Hurston as one of 2 tackles on Auburn's defensive team of the 1960s. He was also selected to play in the North-South Shrine Bowl game in 1964. Chuck earned his bachelor's degree in industrial engineering from Auburn, then embarked on a career in the pros. He was drafted by both the Green Bay Packers and the Buffalo Bills. He signed with Buffalo, the defending AFL champions. A year later, his contract was picked up by the Kansas City Chiefs, who moved him to defensive end, and there he found a home. Hurston secured a starting role by his 2nd season in 1966 and helped Kansas City capture the AFL championship and earn a trip to the very first Super Bowl. On January 15, 1966, in Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum, Chuck Hurston was introduced as a starting defensive end for Kansas City. One of his primary targets that afternoon, Green Bay Packers quarterback Bart Starr. The Chiefs, under head coach Hank Stram, lost to the Packers 35-10 that afternoon before a crowd of 65,000. 4 years later, though, the results were sweeter as Hurston and his Kansas City Chiefs upset the Minnesota Vikings 23-7 in the 1970 Super Bowl. Hurston played 7 seasons in the pros before a knee injury forced him to retire. In 2004, Chuck was inducted into the Atlanta Athletic Club Hall of Fame. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight, the Chattahoochee Valley Sports Hall of Fame is proud to induct Chuck Hurston.
Ladies and gentlemen, class of 2006 Hall of Famer Chuck Hurston.
Jim, I don't really need a tape of my speech, but I do want one of Mr. Britt's, please. How do you follow that? It was awesome. It is an honor to go into the hall, and I'm especially excited about going in with a couple of people that are already there, and one is Hugh Royer, and the other is my old high school coach, Bill Godwin. Right after, I don't know if you know it or not, but Hugh had his choice to either play golf or basketball at the University of Georgia, and he chose golf. But when he had just graduated from Georgia, and I was at Auburn, and we played together in an industrial league in town during one winter. Hugh had to set the rules. He said, he's there to score, I'm there to rebound, and the other three guys pass him the ball and get out of the way. And we did win the league that year, by the way. Some people say that Coach Bear Bryant was the toughest on his players than anybody else in football. I disagree. It was a guy named Coach Bill Godwin. He put us through unmitigated hell. I'm telling you, our practices were as hard as I've ever been in either college or pro. Jimmy Yancey and Earl Hamilton and I were talking about it the other day, and just how hard those practices were, and what went on. What I guess we realize now, that he was taking boys and teaching us that life is going to be hard, and we had to be tough physically and mentally to get through the hard times. We appreciate that now. It was still awful tough. There's another coach here from Jordan, Coach Denny Trotter, who's here tonight. And Coach Trotter was one of the coaches too, and he's the one that kept Coach Godwin from running me off when I was small and slow, and gave me a chance to grow after a couple of years and get some height and a little bit of ability. And I thank him for that, and he also signed me to my football scholarship for Auburn University. I signed in his office when signing day came around. So Coach Trotter, I appreciate you coming. The Chattahoochee Valley was well represented in the first Super Bowl that Jim was talking about. We had 4 starters from Auburn on the Kansas City Chiefs team, and 3 of them are from the Chattahoochee Valley. It was me, it was David Hill, a tackle, and Bobby Hunt, a safety, who are both from Lynette High School and played at Auburn. The 4th guy was a guy named Wayne Frazier, and Wayne was from Evergreen, Alabama. I'm not sure there still has been 4 starters on one team in any Super Bowl since then. Unfortunately, in that game, Green Bay had a great player from Alabama named Bart Starr, and they beat us pretty good. But we did go back to Super Bowl 4, and we beat Minnesota. Six years later, Kansas City put me on waivers, and I wound up back at Buffalo. First person I saw when I got there was a man named Harvey Johnson, who was the general manager, and he said, "Chuck, where have you been?" I said, "Harvey, I've been to the Super Bowl." I played with some great running backs in ball. Mike Garrett at Kansas City, who was a Heisman Trophy winner. Tucker Fredericks in Auburn. But one of the best running backs I've ever played for was Jan Commander at Jordan High School. I appreciate this honor, and in a way I feel it's a tribute to the Jordan High boys of the late 50s. There's 32 people here tonight to help me celebrate, most of them with a Jordan connection. Not a lot was expected of us, but most of us have done very well, and we have a bond like brothers, and it'll last a lifetime. Not living in Columbus, I miss that, but it's always there. People who know the Hurston family know that who is responsible for any success we have had, and that's my heroes, my parents, Fred and Nancy Hurston. Thank you for this award.
Thank you, Chuck Hurston, and congratulations, and as well, congratulations to all the family members present. If you would, permit me just a side comment. Chuck and I were earlier talking about in the late 50s, I was attempting to play football at Columbus High School while Chuck was playing at Jordan. And in the famous Columbus-Jordan game, the last game of the season when Memorial Stadium was well stocked in attendance, my coach, Ralph Pyburn, and I as a sophomore was asked to go into punt formation, and I was a young sophomore punter. So this was on 3rd down, and we were supposed to throw a pass out into the flats. Well, we lined up, the snap came to me. I was to throw a pass out into the right flats, but fake a punt, and through the line came this 6'5" individual that when he jumped, he was 10 feet 5. That gentleman's name was Chuck Hurston, and he intercepted that pass, and when he landed on the ground, he was standing in the end zone. So, Chuck, I kind of feel like you owe me 6. Our next inductee was twice All-Bi-City running back and Brian Piccolo Memorial Award winner as best player in the Bi-City while at Central High School in 1974 through 1977. He was a 3-year letterman as a running back for the University of Alabama and a member of the 1978-1979 SEC and National Championship teams. He played 4 seasons with the Kansas City Chiefs, 1981 to 84, rushing for 1,365 yards and 16 touchdowns. Served as a probation officer in the Muskogee County Juvenile Court for 5 years, inspiring dozens of youthful offenders to change their lives, and has been executive director of the Phoenix City Russell County Boys and Girls Clubs for over 10 years. Please direct your attention to the screen.
Billy Jackson's run for the Hall of Fame started in the backfield of the Central Red Devils in Phoenix City. During his sophomore season in 1974, he played in only 4 games but rushed for 450 yards. His teammates voted him the most valuable back on the team that year. His junior year, Jackson amassed over 800 yards rushing, averaging 5 yards a carry, helping Central to an 8-2 record, their best season since 1959. Jackson made the All-Bi-City team twice during his high school career, also received the Brian Piccolo Memorial Award for the best high school player in the Bi-City area. His abilities both on and off the field caught the eye of Coach Bear Bryant at the University of Alabama. In 1977, Jackson headed to Tuscaloosa, where he was a 3-year letterman for the Crimson Tide, and his timing couldn't have been better. Jackson played on the squads in 1978 and 79 that earned back-to-back Southeastern Conference and National Championship titles. Jackson holds a special place in the Alabama record books for having one of the longest touchdown runs from scrimmage. He had an 87-yarder against the University of Florida in 1978. In 1981, Jackson's eyes turned to the pros. He was selected in the 7th round of the NFL draft by the Kansas City Chiefs. He would spend 4 seasons with Kansas City, playing in 57 games, averaging 3.5 yards per carry. His busiest season was in 1983. Jackson rushed 152 times, gaining 499 yards. He scored 16 touchdowns playing for the Chiefs. 10 of those came in his rookie season. After retiring from pro football, Jackson returned home to the Columbus area. He spent 5 years working in the juvenile court system, trying to help young people turn their lives around. He has spent over 10 years as executive director of the Phoenix City Russell County Boys and Girls Club. Ladies and gentlemen, the Chattahoochee Valley Sports Hall of Fame is proud to induct Billy Jackson.
Congratulations. Take a look at the camera over there.
First of all, I'd like to thank the God of heaven for allowing all of us to be here tonight. I don't have any stories like these guys have up here, and I was just sitting there thinking, these guys played before I was born. I was looking, I guess I was the only one that played when they was filming games, I guess. But anyway, I'd like to also thank my family, my wife, and my children for making my life complete. I looked out in the audience and I see my head coach, and I guess I'm the only guy that's young enough to head coach to still be living. So, Coach Wayne Krawick, who also is an inductee in the Chattahoochee Hall of Fame. I'll tell you a story. True story. I was a 10th grader playing for Central High School, and I was the only sophomore that was playing varsity football at that time. And we was practicing one day, probably one of the hottest days that we had that summer. And we were scrimmaging, and Coach Trawick put me in, and I thought I was only going to be in for about 3 or 4 plays, but I ended up running the ball 42 times straight. And it got to a point to where he began to start calling the play out. And he would come up to me and ask me, Billy, are you tired? and I guess I was too young and too dumb to say I was. So. But I guess that probably was the starting point of my career and the test for endurance. When I played football, I played and I gave it everything that I had. I never considered myself a very good ball player, but I would challenge anyone to work as hard as I did. I was probably the strongest guy on our football team. I benched over 400 pounds coming out of high school. And I was the third strongest guy when I went to Alabama. Believe it or not, I was the second strongest guy when I went into the pros. I worked very hard at what I did. I was drafted in the 7th round to the Kansas City Chiefs, which came as a very surprise to me. I never thought I was good enough to play professional football. I played in the Senior Bowl, and Coach Bryant, the guys asked him, "Do you think Billy Jackson can play any professional football?" And he said, "Yeah, put him in the Senior Bowl and see." And I played with the Heisman Trophy winner that year and a bunch of other guys, and did pretty good. And I was drafted, and I never forget, I was getting ready to go to class that morning because, this was the second day of the draft. At that time, they had 12 rounds. And the phone rang, and Marv Levy was on the phone and said, "Billy Jackson, we just drafted you in the 7th round." I said, "Are you for sure?" And he said, "Yeah, just listen, you hear your name called." And they drafted me, and I went out, and the first day, I was working so hard. The first day I went out for minicamp, I sprained my ankle. And I thought, I can't stop. I can't stop. And you're a rookie and you want to be tough, so I didn't even get my ankle wrapped. I had some tape and I taped it up myself. But I went out and I practiced. And I didn't even limp on it, and it was a very severe sprain. But I said that to say this. When I was in high school, I can recall a game where I had a separated shoulder, and then Coach Cray remembered this game, I know. My junior year, and I wasn't supposed to dress out for that game, but I had sneaked my uniform on the bus, and we got to the stadium, and Coach Cray, he really needed me, and well, Billy, you're not supposed to dress out. I said, "Well, Coach, just let me put the uniform on, and I'll just stand over there by you." So we're playing against Auburn High School, and they was leading us 7-0. And I was standing by Coach Travick, and we wasn't doing anything. So he looked around, and I was on the field. And he wanted to bring me back out, but he left me out there. And I guess he said, while I got him out there, I guess I may as well run him. So we went down there, ran the ball all the way down the field, and he took me out and he let somebody else score. But those things, football, I think it taught me a lot about the game of life. It taught me that sacrifice. Everybody needs to get to a point in their life where they know how to sacrifice. It also taught me unselfishness. You all saw me running the football, but I made it into college on my blocking. I made it into the pros on blocking. And this is an unselfish attitude. You have to be very unselfish to want to block for another person. And also in life, it teaches you that you have to put others above self. Also, football taught me discipline. All of these guys here who are athletes know that there are many days, hot, 95, 96 degrees, sometimes 100 degrees. I remember Coach Bryant saying, "You can't be ordinary to play this game." And at that time, we had a pretty good team. I was 44-4 during my college career. We won 2 national championships, never lost to Auburn. Mr. Bagley, I had to put that in. But we only lost one SEC game. And I can remember Coach Bryant saying, well, fellas, you're not ordinary. You know, all of your friends, you know, they out at the park with the girlfriends and but one thing you have that they don't have. So on Saturday, they're gonna be up in the stand sitting with their girlfriend watching you. And they say, if you're gonna be special, you can't be ordinary. And I find that also in life. Any people who are impact people, they get into all different type of circumstances, and they're gonna affect that circumstance one way or the other. In my family, I want to be an impact person. I want to be the best father that I can be. I want to be the best husband. My children may say I did a pretty good job, but the verdict is still out on the best husband. But not only them, but also my immediate family. I grew up with no mother. My mother died when I was 12 years old. There were 8 of us, very hard, very hard. And my motto in life was determined to win. I was determined that I was going to do something. And I'll sit down after this. Out of all that I've done, my only regret is that my mother never saw any of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Billy Jackson. Congratulations, and congratulations to the family as well. Our next inductee lettered in football and track at Oklahoma State University, where he was a blocking back and ran the mile and 2-mile events. He coached for 27 years in Oklahoma, Colorado, and California, winning state football championships before moving to Columbus in 1957. He coached Baker High School track teams from 1963 through 1969, winning 5 state Class AAA championships and 2 state all-class championships. He was honored 4 times as State Coach of the Year, earned United States District Coach of the Year in a 7-state area, and was runner-up in the National Coach of the Year competition while at Baker High School. He was an American history and U.S. government teacher at Baker High School, a position he truly loved. Would you direct your attention to the screen?
Sam Roberts was 54 years old when he arrived in Columbus. He was hired as a teacher of American history and U.S. government at Baker High School in 1957. Roberts had spent much of his career coaching high school track and football in Colorado and California, so it was no surprise when he began helping with the Baker track team in 1961. 2 years later, he was named head track coach, and from there, a dynasty developed. His Baker Lions won 7 Bi-City championships, 6 Columbus relay titles, and 5 state AAA track championships from 1964 through 1969. Baker claimed back-to-back Georgia all-class titles in 1963 and 64. For his efforts, Coach Roberts was named the Coach of the Year by the Georgia High School Coaches Association 4 times. Roberts retired from teaching and coaching in the Muskogee County school system in 1972 after reaching the mandatory retirement age of 70, only to head across the river in Phoenix City and coach Glenwood's track team. Under his leadership, the Gators won the school's first state track championship in 1973.
You would do things for Coach Roberts that you would never dream you could do, and one of his biggest sayings to us was, I can take you and make you a backyard champion if you want to be a champion. and I think wanting to be a champion. And I think he has something to prove because he had to mandatorily retire in Georgia at the age of 70. And I think he wanted to prove to people that Sam Roberts could still accomplish something. And we won 2 state championships, so it was amazing.
Sam Roberts died at the age of 78 in 1981. Tonight, the Chattahoochee Valley Sports Hall of Fame is proud to posthumously induct Sam Roberts.
Accepting for class of 2006 Hall of Famer the late Sam Roberts, one of his student athletes and current coach, Randy Whitt. Randy, take a look at the camera.
Well, obviously, I'm not Sam Roberts. And, you know, it's really kind of an interesting thing. When they first asked me to do this, I was completely honored. But, you know, honestly, sitting up here with these people, I truly feel like the illegitimate child at a family reunion. You know, it's so many times since he's asked me this, is what am I doing here? I think what I'm doing here tonight is trying to introduce you people, many of you who never knew him, to probably the greatest coach that has ever been in Columbus, Georgia. You can look at the accolades, you can look at all the awards, you can look at all the honors, but maybe more than anything else, you can look at the athletes that he coached. There's a few of those here. If there's any athletes, and this probably is not normal, but are there any people who either coached with Coach Roberts or ran for Coach Roberts that happen to be here tonight? If y'all could stand, I really would appreciate that. I know there's several that are here. Dwight's here, many of them that are here. The reason I'm asking them to do this, because I think that after I accepted this task, I realized that what I'm really up here trying to do is to speak for all of these people, and that's going to be just about impossible to do. Sam Roberts was an innovator, more than anybody I believe I've ever met. I have off and on been coaching since 1970. I've been at Columbus High School now for 26 years, I guess. And honestly, I look back on it now as a coach and as a teacher, realizing how far ahead of his time this man really was. He, just a couple of years ago, they got into things about running, and like these are new innovations. And I remember back in the 60s, Sam Roberts had us doing those things way back in the 60s. He didn't have fancy names for them, but it's just what he had us doing. And I think that by doing that, he kept himself so far ahead of the times that it was just, I mean, it was almost unbelievable. Probably the best example I can give you of that is I know in 1966, we had won a state championship again that year. And that was the 3rd year in a row he had won the state championship in track. Incidentally, one of the things that a lot of people aren't that aware of is that he also won some state championships in cross country. And back then, cross country really wasn't a very well-known sport, but I know I was on 2 of those teams that we won state championships in cross country. I hadn't even thought about that till just that minute. But in 1966, it was an all-comers meet in Atlanta. And this was a pretty turbulent time in America racially. And there was some people at Carver that were some very, very good runners. And Sam Roberts went over and got those guys to come run with Baker runners in an all-comers meet in Atlanta. And I think it was the first time in the history of the state of Georgia that you really had black and white athletes running together. Because you see, back then they had a black high school association and a white high school association. Didn't bother Sam. You know, he just, fine, let's go, you know, we'll run. We didn't care, we won. That's all we cared about. And we got along fine, and I thought it was really interesting that back in 1980, I moved back to Columbus, and the very first meet that I went to, this guy came up to me that was coaching at Carver, and he said, "Man, you don't remember me, do you?" He said, "We ran together back in 1966. It was one of those guys from Carver that I had run with." And this is a tribute to what Sam Roberts did. I mean, nothing bothered him like that. It was just not even an issue for him. And he was so far ahead of his time. A lot of people remember things about Coach Roberts, and you know, you saw a picture. I think one of the things that's always been funny to me is that somebody would say something about Coach Roberts, and they said, "Now, wasn't he that coach that always had that dog with him?" And if y'all saw in them pictures up there, he had Mike. Mike the dog was with him almost all the time. He carried this little chihuahua around just about everywhere we went. He just, you know, I mean, it just, people remember those things. I was in Atlanta, I think it was about 2 years ago. I'd gotten an award because I had a really good discus thrower. And was up at the Atlanta Track Club, and they offered me this award, and the guy that was introducing me said, yes, you know, he had this girl that did all these things, and then he said, and I remember watching him run for Sam Roberts back when he was in high school, and you could hear this gasp through the crowd of the older people that were there. It didn't matter who I was, they knew who Sam Roberts was, though. And this was, I mean, this has been years since he had even coached. I mean, it's just amazing the following that this man had all through his career. Now, I don't know anything about his career in California. I just know what he did for us at Baker. And I think that's where it is so difficult for me to come up here tonight and do this, because I know that what I'm really trying to tell you is what this man meant to myself and so many of these other athletes that he worked with. One of the unusual things about him is that back in the 60s, he had a master's degree. Now, if you go back and look in the high school annuals of the schools back then, having a master's degree was really unusual. He had a master's degree in psychology. It wasn't in history, it wasn't in coaching, it was in psychology. And I think that if there was anything that he taught us, is he had this slogan that he was constantly telling us. He said, look, he said, this sport, mainly he was talking about track and field, but he was really talking about everything in athletics. He said, athletics is about 10% physical and about 90% mental. And you think about that and you say, no, that just can't be true. But he really believed that if you weren't mentally prepared, if you weren't mentally right, then the rest of it was just a waste. What he did is he took a bunch of kids and inspired them to really do great things. And I think that's one thing that all coaches should be able to do, but I don't know of that many that really do. He would go out into school, and just basically he would get people that wanted to excel. Well, maybe they didn't even want to excel. They didn't even know what they wanted, and maybe that was a secret to it. Because he was able to take just normal, average people, high school students, get them and just challenge them to see how good they could become. And he didn't, no experience necessary, didn't matter. If you're willing to work, and you're willing to work hard, you're willing to do what I tell you to do, you'll be a champion. Just like Dwight said in that clip, you're going to be a champion if you do what I ask you to do, if you believe in yourself. I know I was fortunate. Because of Coach Roberts, I was able to go to college for free, completely 4 years for free in college. You know, ranked pretty high nationally in a couple of events. But the thing of it is, it was so fascinating to me, is I remember one day, I had never started running until I was a junior in high school. And I went out to thank my brother for that. He taught me. I was a baseball player. And he conned me into, he said, you know, you just need to go out for cross country to get in shape for baseball. Well, I went out for cross country and never played a baseball game again, I don't think. But went to college for free, so I can't argue. But one day we were at practice, and I had missed practice one day. And I got there late. The team was just coming in from a workout, and there was this one guy that came in, and he was one of our best distance runners. I mean, this guy was good. Now, there's a state championship teams I'm talking about. This guy was really a good runner. And they were coming down at Baker. There was this long straightaway from Benning Hills, Benning Hills, all the way back down to the school. And he came in, and I mean, he came in, and he was just exhausted. I couldn't believe it. He was just so tired. He was coming, and he just hung on the fence when he got right at the finish line. I mean, he couldn't hardly talk. He was just sitting there gasping for air. And he was sitting there, and I was just looking at him because this guy was good. I couldn't believe it. And he sat there, and he said, I finally did it. I finally did it. And I was kind of looking at him, and I was just wide-eyed. I didn't know what to think. He said, I finally saw Stenberg finish. Now, Eddie Stenberg was this guy that went on to Duke, was an All-American at Duke, and his goal was to see this guy finish. And I was looking at this guy, and all I could think to myself was, gosh, I don't ever hurt like that. I thought he was good, you know? And I kind of glanced over because I felt something, and Coach Roberts was staring right at me. He never said a word. It was just kind of shrugged his shoulders and said, can you deal with that? Can you handle that? Are you ready for that? Without saying a word, he could do more as a coach than anybody I ever saw. He believed in the psychology of coaching. He believed that I don't care who you are, if you're willing to work, if you're willing to try, if you're willing to sacrifice, you can be good. I said one time to him, I said, well, we were talking about winning, and I said, well, Coach Roberts, I said, everybody wants to win. He said, no, they don't. He said, maybe 10% of the people in this whole world really want to win. Everybody else just talks about it. And, you know, I've come to believe that. I don't care what profession you're in. I don't care what you do in life. You want to win? You're willing to pay the price? You're willing to work at it? You can do it. And I think that tonight, hopefully, I've said something that all of those athletes, from California to Oklahoma to Columbus to Glenwood and Phoenix City, can identify with. Because what he did is he simply just took a group of normal, average kids and did something with them. So tonight, I thank those people for honoring Coach Roberts. I thank you for listening to what I have to say. I teach school. Most of the time I don't get listened to anyway. But so any of y'all that are teachers, you can identify with that. But I guess as much as anything, I just hope that somehow I've conveyed what this man has meant to all of us. Because really what he did is he just took a bunch of normal kids and he said, do you want to win? Are you willing to pay the price? And I guess for everybody that ever ran for him, everybody that ever knew him, thank you, Coach Roberts, for inspiring in us something that we never knew we had, for taking us and making us dream at levels that we never dreamed we could do, for making us winners. But maybe more than anything else, Coach Roberts, thank you for making us champions. Thank you.
Thank you, Randy, for those words. We'll continue to remember the accomplishments of Sam Roberts and the lives that he's touched throughout the years. It's been a great evening, ladies and gentlemen. In closing, allow me to share these words with you. There's at least one graphic measure by which we citizens of the Chattahoochee Valley gauge the distinction of our men and women. We think it's the Chattahoochee Valley Sports Hall of Fame. While it's physically located in the Columbus Civic Center, more importantly, I believe it's located within our hearts. Tonight, we added 5 more men of distinction to that list. We received them in large part because they dreamed and were visionaries of perfection. They dreamed nobly and they acted. Taken all together, they have been enormously effective in making the Chattahoochee Valley a better place to live. Ladies and gentlemen, before we adjourn, would you join with me by standing and giving one final round of applause to the class of 2006. Good night, everyone.